So excellent, this is working. So I'll turn some taps on and do what I'm doing. Excellent. So I decided to do a live stream because I haven't posted anything up for a while. Been slightly unwell and then had house guests for a week, so it was quite busy. So going to do a few things in the fish room, and I have a few projects. Instead of doing a separate video, I thought I'll just do a live stream. If anyone's interested, they can sort of check it out later. So that's what I'm doing, and very good. Excellent. So reservoir is filling, and now I need to drain those ones. So we go, turn that off, turn this on. Let's go. Oh, hello, whoever just joined. I'm just doing a quick live stream because I haven't been on for a while. And I have a few projects I planned which I'm really excited about, so I thought I'll just do a little live stream instead of doing a recorded video. So that's the plan. So while I'm doing that, I'm also decided I'll do a water change, and my friend Trevor suggested I should do water changes when I'm live streaming, so that I always say I'm flooding the joint. He wanted to see it live when it happens. So I'm filling the reservoir on one hand and draining tanks on the other. So chances are I'm going to flood the place. So anyways, so that's okay. That's working. The drain. So a couple of my new projects. One is, if you watched my other video, I got small terrariums to breed egg scatterers in. I just got a much larger version, so I'm just going to put Java moss in here with a grid underneath to have sort of larger size fish spawn in, so that I can take this out to get my eggs out. So that's the current plan. So now I'm draining these 4 tanks, which you can't see, but that's what's happening. So my other plan is to start doing a automatic water change system for my shoeboxes. So my tanks currently are semi-auto water change, where I turn taps on and off. So that's kind of how I do the water changes. I don't need to siphon them and etc. anymore to water change. I only occasionally will need to siphon them just to get the mulm and stuff off the bottom, but the water change is done with taps. Currently I do the water change in the shoe boxes manually, so I end up taking the filter out, basically carefully pour the water into a bucket and then refill it. It sort of seems like a lot of work at the moment because I'm currently running 22 of these shoe boxes, because water changes in the tanks is just with taps on and off. I thought I should come up with a solution with that one as well. So I am going to use this hose and fittings that they sell for RO units and home water filtration systems and stuff. So the rigid tubing and the Oops, I started flooding the place. I don't know if you can hear the water. So Trevor, that was for you. Flooded the joint while I am doing live streams. I'll just show you the flood so that sort of the the water started dripping and stuff, and it's going all over the place. So yeah, so that's how I do water changes, by flooding the place initially. So that's why I never wash the floor, because it always gets water anyway when I'm doing water changes. So that was just a really small water top up in my water reservoirs, because I did do a couple of rows of tanks water change last night, so my water reservoir was down about that much. So, and like, let's say it was quarter down, 3/4 full, so now I just topped up those reservoirs. It doesn't like fully quarter full, so it's sort of maybe half of that got filled with water from the tap. Because bulk of that water is edge water, I don't worry about when I'm refilling the tanks. So I got two of my tanks drained already. One I forgot about and it drained too much, but that's how it works. So anyways, so I'm going to use the this not irrigation, this is RO unit, so it's sort of like, I don't know if you guys can see, it's a air hose diameter, it's rigid tubing, and I got a bunch of taps and stuff, so I'm going to use them, and a lot of RO, this sort of pipe fitting to be able to do the water changes. The idea is I'm going to have the line going either behind or in front, or on top. I haven't decided. I'm going to have individual lines going in to the shoe boxes. I'm going to obviously have tap for each so that I can turn them on and off. And I'm also planning on putting I'm sort of going to cut that obviously smaller, but have that in like that, so that when I siphon it or refill the tank, the water goes through the sponge. I use like 1/3 of this sponge, so that I won't accidentally suck the fry out as well, so that I can do as many water changes I want in the shoe boxes, because shoe boxes pretty much end up having the fry in them. So at the moment, because I do it manually, it's a bit of a pain, so I'm going to use this irrigation. And because all of my racks and tanks, and even the silicone on the tanks and stuff, you guys can possibly see or might have seen in the photos and stuff, because they're black, and I use at the back here, I don't know if it's visible, the taps. I use 13 mil irrigation pipes, which are also black. So the RO water, that's what I'm calling it, because I don't know the actual word. So I actually bought a black version of the pipe, as the hose as well. So I'm just going to use the black one mostly, so that it sort of fits in with the color scheme of the room. It just makes it look neater than it is. So I got a couple of rolls of, I don't know, this is 10 meters, I think. Initially I got a couple of these to be able to do that. I'm going to use that. That's going to be my next project, because even though I do water changes in these shoe boxes fairly regularly, when I do get busy, it ends up being a bit of a pain to do. Just take the filter out, pour the water, and then refill it. So I'm going to experiment how I can use that auto water changing. And this is my other thing I got, where I'm going to put the plants and whatever with a grid underneath, and I got this so that it actually fits into my Kmart size tank. These are sort of 23 to 25 liter tanks, so this actually fits in there almost all the way through from side to side. So fish will go in there, spawn, and then I'll be able to take this out. So I made this one. Hey, good evening, how are you? So while I'm doing water changes and stuff, I thought I'll just do this quick video so that you guys know that I'm alive and still around. I've just been slightly unwell, and we had visitors stay with us for over a week, so I couldn't do any content for a little bit. So, and I'm doing water changes. So the fish room, good evening. You're in New Zealand, I'm pretty sure. So g'day to New Zealand. So, and what else I'm doing today? So far I already flooded the place since I started the live stream, so that's going well, on track. So the other thing that I've done, I was online shopping for this stuff, the fittings and things and elbows and taps and stuff, and I came across this thing. I thought I'll just get one to test. So this is supposed to sort of float in a tank. It's like an isolation container. This little foam thing will keep it floating, and it has a very fine grid on it. So I thought this would be a great little thing for me incubating some of my Corydorus eggs, because as you guys, some of you know, I knew it was New Zealand. So as you guys know, I breed a lot of Corys, and often I have lots of different containers with eggs in them and stuff. I basically always try to reduce the amount of time I do things when I have them in containers. I need to change the water regularly until they hatch and stuff. I mean, they hatch in 3 days or whatever, but it's still when I'm breeding a lot. So if the ones that don't require antifungal agents, and some Cory eggs do, but a lot of them don't, I can just have the eggs in here floating in the tank, and then all I need to do is like occasionally raise this and then put it back in just to allow fresh water to go in. So that would be a good thing. Can you see that tank? Oh yes, you can. So maybe I'll just show you how this is supposed to look in theory. So I don't know, and it's supposed to float. Well, it does. There you go. So I saw that while looking for irrigation stuff, but so I got it to try it out. I can't see why that wouldn't work really. And what would be excellent is if these guys have spawned, so that I can put their eggs in there. Did you guys spawn? They probably haven't, because they spawned about 6 days ago. And nope, there's no eggs in here. Again, I'm draining one tank too much. Turn these off. And so yeah. Oh, thank you for the sub and the like. So I will do ditto when I'm finished with the live stream for the sub and stuff. And so in this tank I have Aspidoras pilotus, and they spawn on this mop, and also they spawn on the glass behind the mop. So sometimes I put mops in the corner of a tank like this, not necessarily sometimes to have the eggs to go in there, but sometimes cories, like some cories anyway, like to go behind the mop, and that's where they place the eggs. I bred about 45, maybe 50 different species of cories to date, and all of them sort of slightly behave differently, but there are a bunch of them quite alike. So when you figure out how to do, where to place the mops and stuff, then it gets easier to check for the cory eggs and things like that as well. And often if I have cories breeding in a tank where I wasn't even planning on breeding them, but they mature and they start breeding, I have a look at where they place the eggs, and if I can help it, I put a mop on or close to where they spawn so that they can place at least some of the eggs on the mop, so that I can take them out a lot easier, and it becomes a bit easier to keep track of what's happening, because having over 130 tanks in the fish room, I really don't end up having time to spend 4 or 5 minutes looking at each tank every day. So if I don't notice eggs, I'm sure a lot of fish are breeding in the fish room that I miss the eggs and stuff, and fry get eaten and things like that. For example, my gold laser Corridoras, it's CW10. The gold lasers, I haven't really actively tried to breed them for a while. I haven't been checking their mops because they are not on my list of fish to breed, but there's about 4 or 5 fry growing with the parents at the moment. So that's always a bonus when that happens. And I do have a grid on the bottom, so that if a cory breeds without me being aware, there's actually a increased chance of some fries surviving. And if I can find one of those grids, here's a grid. So this is a grid. This is not a clean version, but anyway, so this is a grid that my friend this was actually a grid that my other friend printed for me. This friend is actually in the city that I live in. So what this is it's a sort of a fine grid, but it has these little legs. So what I do is I put this in a cory tank with sometimes I end up having little pebbles or rocks with Anubias and other sort of plants attached to it. I can even put this and have my sponge filter sitting on it, and it just gives this little, I don't know, that's about less than a centimeter height from the bottom, and obviously I have a bit of sand on the bottom. It just reduces that distance even more. So if any cory was to spawn and I miss the eggs, there's a increased chance fry can get under there, because once they have grown a little bit, adults leave them alone. It's when they're like in a ball with a tail shape, that's when they so that's how I sort of, so of the 45, 50 cories I bred, probably about 5 of them I found fry in the tank first, because they either weren't in my radar or I thought they weren't mature enough to breed. And then once I found the fry in the tank, I sort of paid attention to their tank a little bit more, and I mentioned it in other videos in the past. When I am breeding or actively trying to breed a Cory in one of my tanks, I reduce the spawning sites. So if the tank, for example, has 4 bunches of Anubias plant, I reduce it down to 1, so that I have just 1 plant to check under the leaves for eggs and stuff. I increase the number of mops and things like that, and add this sort of grid. And this is the largest one I have. I have a half size of this, and I also have a small round version of this as well. So that sort of works quite well for me when I'm breeding. So I'm just going to turn some more taps on, because while I'm doing this, I'm changing water because we had the visiting guests. I am slightly behind my water changes. I usually don't worry about that, because if I'm behind of one part of Fishroom maintenance, I'm usually behind on a bunch of other things, which means in that week fish also got fed less than usual anyway. So that's all my adults. All the fry got fed a couple of times a day still, but the adult fish tanks didn't get as much food, so the water change being like 4 or 5 days late shouldn't matter. But I like to keep on top of my water changes, especially it's all about just turning taps on and off, so it's relatively easy to do. Yeah, so the other thing that I'm using a lot in the fish room is these pipettes. They're good for pipetting newly hatched brine shrimp into tanks. It's also good when I do feed the decapsulated brine shrimp. When I mix it with water, I pipette this into tanks. I also, when fry newly hatch before they become super mobile, I use this pipette to move them from a container to container. But because it's made from soft plastic, if you guys use them, you know it. After a certain amount of use, the seam splits and it's basically no longer of any use. But these are quite handy, so I end up buying a bunch and then I don't need to buy it for a few years. So I was running low, so got some. Yeah, so and thanks heaps for joining. Really, I don't like doing water changes on my own. And if you end up having any questions about the fish room or how I do something specific, feel free to ask. I'm planning on doing videos on breeding specific Cories, and also I'm going to do generic breeding Cory videos, and also going to do that for the killies as well. And then I am going to do my breeding videos on all the other fish I breed, like CPDs and emerald danios and spotted danios, and all the other bits and pieces I breed, some of the tetras and stuff. I have a whole heap of guppies and endlers at the moment as well, so we'll do videos on those. Also, I haven't really mentioned all that much in these videos. I also keep and breed a fair bit of medakas, the Japanese rice fish, and we are currently towards the end of winter in the city I'm in Australia. So another 2-3 weeks I'll be able to put some of my medakas outside, because I brought them in for winter. I'll be able to put them outside, and I'll then do videos on my sort of ponds outside with the medakas, and I can start doing some videos on medaka breeding and also selective breeding in generally, because that's one of the things that I get asked occasionally, because I've been breeding fish for a long time. I wouldn't say I'm a expert at it, but I've done selective breeding for fancy guppies and angelfish mutations and stuff in the past. So I'm going to apply that to Midakas, and only Hayrob, Hope Hull City in the UK is doing well. My team Fenerbahce is doing okay at the moment, but you know, they'll get better, I'm sure. So I'm going to apply some of the selective breeding techniques that I used to use. Well, it's not a technique really, it's about keeping track on things and making sure that I'm selecting the breeders properly and have a proper goal in what my eventual aim is in terms of what to do with this strain. I have been keeping Midakas here for probably good 20 years, but only in the last less than last 12 months, in the last 8 months or so, really interesting with Medaka, the rice fish strain started coming in. So I'm going to be focusing on them in a lot more specific way, and to see what I can do with the various color forms. And I like the Lame Medaka. If you don't know much about Medakas, Lame might not mean anything to you. Lame is the reflective scales on the Medaka. They're usually on the back, and they end up having a bunch of those scales. Obviously, the more of them, the better, and also the distribution of them is quite important. So, selectively breeding to increase the quantity and the placing of the dose is probably some of the first selection things I'm going to do with Medakas, but that's when spring gets here, which is another 2-3 weeks away, probably. And there's actually a bunch of people waiting for me to send them some fish interstate, and I've been telling them wait till spring. So spring is coming. Oh no, spring is coming. It's like winter is coming, but it's spring. Yeah, so what else is happening? And I need to restart my microworm cultures. So I talk about these all the time because this is what helps me do fish keeping better. So these are my microworms. I use a bread and yeast mixture. I mentioned this already, and this is basically when they're not climbing up the sides much. Hello, Hafiften Sosyete. Hoş geldin. So the microworms with the bread, yeast and milk mixture, it works super well. And if you never cultured microworms and stuff before, what I actually do is I have this sort of little probe that comes out from a dissecting kit. I just scrape the side of the container like that, and the camera is not that great, so I have some microworms there, and then all I do is I actually swish it in the fry tanks. These fry are too old, but they'll still eat them, and might as well feed these guys. So that's how I feed microworms. It doesn't need rinsing or anything because I'm only getting them as they climb up the side. So who else wants this? I think these guys and some of the CBD fry, and then some. Oops, that was the cubitai fry. So they'll have that as well. Yeah. So, oops, I'm draining this tank a little bit too much. So I mentioned it before, I have my tanks all connected to each other via 13 mil irrigation pipes, and by turning taps on and off I can drain them. So at the moment I'm draining the one row, so I drained 1, 2, 3, 4, 14 tanks already, doing the 15th one, and then once that's drained I'm going to turn the bottom tap off and then going to turn the reservoir on and going to start filling that rack. So I'm sort of multitasking when I'm talking to you guys. Yeah, so that's working quite well. In one of my other videos I had mentioned my photo tank that I'm going to wrap it with black vinyl. I did that so that I can actually do my fish photography and videos and stuff in here. And I mentioned I'm sort of duplicating this little one because especially for my corries and stuff, the fish gets squished this way, so I need something a little bit bigger. So that matte vinyl, I put it on 3 sides and the bottom, only because this has it on 3 sides and the bottom. So I thought I'll just mimic that because photos and videos in this is coming out pretty good. So that's why I did this. So that at least one project I mentioned I finished. So that's going to be good. And then I'm looking forward to doing the irrigation or the automatic water change for my shoe boxes, and it's going to be these sort of RO water things, and these are supposed to be snap or push lock, so you push it in and it's locked. So that's basically so hopefully when I do these you'll be able to see how I do water changes there. I might do a video on how I'm doing the water change system for the shoe boxes, and if it doesn't work we can all laugh about it together, right? So that's kind of the plan, and that line is done. So I'm going to stop the water and we're going to go into